Yep. Okay, welcome everybody to the Moab City Council meeting. I'm going to call the meeting to order on May 9th at 6:00 p.m. And we'll start out with the pledge. And Mona, if you would lead us in the pledge. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mona. Tawny is not going to be able to attend this evening, so we will be without Tawny. And we'll move right into citizens to be heard. So if you'd like to speak, you have 3 minutes to speak. And if you wouldn't mind just stating your name and filling out a form and place it in the box, that would be great. So do we have any citizens to be heard? Yes.
Sorry to bother you again.
It's okay. It's always nice to see you.
My name is Pete Gross. I wanted to point out an ambiguity in my proposal to you in my email several weeks ago now. When I talked about bringing Les Blomberg, the noise pollution clearinghouse expert, back to do training for the police department, I was specifically thinking of the drive-by test. That's the one they did at Sandflats. Jameson Wiggins was in attendance there. And just to give you an idea, tailpipe test, it's the Society of Automotive Engineers, it's SAE J 1287, specifically says in their test, this just, tested under laboratory conditions, doesn't give you the noise that they generate under actual operating conditions. And they recommend a drive-by test. And the drive-by test, when they conducted the Sandflats, Les Blomberg did a presentation before the county commission, their noise workshop round 2 or something. They tested 67 vehicles. They also did an F-150 pickup under full throttle acceleration that passed the test. Of numerous cars, trucks, and Jeeps all passed. 2 out of 2 motorcycles were in excess of what would be the current noise ordinance violation, and 6 out of 27, so 22% of UTVs. Now, this is a relatively small sample, so it's not necessarily indicative of what it would be, overall, but it's pretty representative. And just for comparison, I did my own sort of informal measurements sitting at near Rotary Park, monitoring vehicles. I measured 25 feet to the center line of Mill Creek Drive and measured actually both directions. So some of them were closer to 50 feet and got similar results, probably not as many as 22%, but certainly a significant number of violations of UTVs and a couple of others, but mostly it was what they found at Sandflats was pretty indicative. Anyway, so that was what I was hoping to proposing, bringing Les Blomberg back to train the police department, assuming they were still interested. And also that is the test that I would suggest, because that's the one that is representative of what under actual operating conditions. Okay, thank you.
Great,
For your time
thanks,
again.
Pete. Could you fill out one of those forms?
Oh, yes.
Put it in the box. That would be great. Thank you. Anybody else? Citizens to be heard. Okay, we will move on to the Rotary Club. An update from your successful weekend. It looked like a lot of fun. Come on up.
I was kind of hoping you'd drive up.
My caliber is being worked on, otherwise I would.
So did you guys make it down to the car show?
Mhm,
Oh, good. It's quite a crowd down there.
Mhm.
Lots of people.
mhm,
A lot of locals.
mhm.
Yeah. Little children's and people with gray hair, the whole gamut. So we thought it was a very successful car show. To me, it seems like the happiest event we have all year. Everybody's just got smiles on their faces. All ages can enjoy it. So we just wanted to come down and thank the city for all the stuff that they did for us. Rotary is a volunteer organization, and sometimes we're not very well organized. And starting with Kelly with the permit, she gave us quite a string of little gentle emails to remind us that we needed this or that to get our permits. And then Swanee Park was just looking great. And the people went out there and got the sprinklers marked so we could get set up on Friday afternoon. The city workers delivering the barriers and cones, Jace, William, Alex, and Lane. They got those cones in just the right spots. So when we went there early, we could get them all set up. That worked out very well. And then big shout out to the Moab City Police. They came and talked to us the Monday before while we met down there, make sure everything was understood and was going to work. And then Saturdays, sometime early in the morning, they made sure the park was empty and that the parking around there was cleared out so we could get our vendors in. It just worked out so nice. We even had Highway Patrol and the fire department got a hold of us to ask if they could bring their officers and their fire trucks down, give a little fun thing for the kids to go see. So that worked out really too. The crowds were amazing. Our paid attendance for cars was down about 40%. And we think what happened was we didn't know if we needed a Grand County permit because part of what we offer in the car show is a rod run. You guys know what a rod run is? It's an organized drive, usually up to Green River. A couple members of the club will organize people that are registered. And on Friday, after they check in, they'll drive up to Green River. They usually set up with Green River to have a little mini car show. Have the cars out there on their main street for a couple hours and have lunch, and then they drive back. And we didn't do that this year, and we think it really hurt the number of paid cars coming. So we're definitely going to do that next year. We'll get organized earlier, and we'll make sure we've got both permits if we need them. We also brought back the food trucks, the food vendors. That's for us, that's a lot of work because we have to police the park. It's a lot of trash to pick up. And they just had a great day. The folks from Broken Ore brought their barbecue truck down, and they said they had to restock it twice because they sold so much stuff. Same thing with ice flavored ice lady. She said, next year I'm bringing 2 trucks of ice down. So they were very happy. I spoke to managers from 3 restaurants. They said that weekend was probably the best they've had all year. So that was good for town too. And once again, we just appreciate all the police and all the workers. And any questions?
Questions from council?
Sorry if I missed it when you started. Did you introduce yourselves? I mean,
Oh,
you
I'm
know.
sorry. I'm Steve
I-
Getz.
Yes, I may know, but not everybody may know, so you should get
I'm
credit.
I'm Steve Getz. I'm this year's president of Rotary.
And I'm Joe Kingsley. I'm the old fart.
So
Anybody else? Great job, you guys. Glad to see it back up in full swing. It is one of our best events. So keep it up.
could I take a second and brag up about Rotary?
Sure, please do.
We have room at the table if anybody wants to join. One of the good things about Rotary is our network. In Utah, there's about 43 clubs. And one of the things that we do is we network and we help each other out. And the best example of that is with our free health clinic. When Jeanette joined Rotary, she was able to make connections with Rotarians in Salt Lake City and Park City. And so many of the doctors and nurses and medical folks that come down and volunteer at her clinic are Rotarians. And then the vision clinics is another Rotarian connection that Jeanette made. So it's really helped our community, just the network of us less than organized people.
You guys do a great job. You have for a long time.
Thank
So
you.
really
Thank you.
appreciate everything the Rotary does. So
Thank you.
thanks.
Appreciate the time.
You bet.
Thanks.
We also do scholarships.
Yes, you
Oh, yeah,
do.
we do all kinds of stuff. So.
You do a lot of good work. Thanks, you guys. All right, next we have a proclamation. And I hope I have it here. I do. This week, well, actually, it's not this week. It's May 21st through the 27th is National Public Works Week. And the theme for this year is connecting the world through public works. And as we all know, our Public Works Department has been very busy this year. They had a lot fall on their plates that they weren't expecting. And so I'd like to read this proclamation. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facility, and services that are of vital importance to the sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Moab City. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of the public work professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, solid waste system, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for citizens, civic leaders, and children in Moab City to gain knowledge of and maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas in year 2023 marks the 63rd annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Association, Canada Public Works Association, be it now resolved that I, Joette Langanese, Mayor, do hereby designate the week of May 21st through 27th, 2023 as National Public Works Week. I urge all citizens to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies and activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public work professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. So nobody here is here from Public Works. I had the opportunity to let Levi know how much we all appreciate the work that he and his staff has done. So I don't know if there's any events scheduled for 21 through 27, but if there is, we'll definitely let you know so that you can participate. All right, next we have Mona and Scott here to talk to us about the code compliance.
Just a second to get this set up for you. Okay. So we're just going to talk a little bit about code compliance tonight. A couple of the topics that the mayor and I have talked about going over are the structure, some examples, complaints to other departments or agencies, and then how to file a complaint. So when you've got residents that come to you, you can direct them just where to go. So the first topic is the code compliance structure, and Scott's actually going to talk about that.
So over the past few months, all the department heads have been sitting down to try to best utilize code enforcement and code compliance to be very efficient in how they're dealing with code violations. Code compliance and code enforcement is a very unique part of a city function that we hold in dealing with any parking issues, nuisance properties, and those types of things. And so over the past 3 or 4 months, we've tried to restructure to best utilizes the resources in which the city has. So this is the current model that we're currently using, or we've gone to as department heads. And I'm going to kind of explain how this kind of works. So your code compliance officer is merely your facilitator of information. So basically they are the control point. And then if you look at the wheel that's up there, all the other stakeholders within that are the outside wheel, meaning you have fire department, you have planning, zoning, business licensing, code enforcement, the chief of police, all of those other resources in which the city utilizes to handle code enforcement. So basically how the structure works now is when a complaint comes in, it comes into our code compliance officer, who then reviews that information. The code compliance officer then reviews it and says, hey, do we need further investigation on this issue? And so if that needs to happen, then that is now forwarded out to our code enforcement officers. So our code enforcement officers are our field agents now when dealing with violations. So if a violation comes in and say we have a nuisance house with debris and cars at this address, then she sends that out to the code enforcement officers. They go out and do the investigation into a meeting. They'll go out and take photos, documentation. They'll generate a case number. They'll write the case report. Then they send all of that information back to the code compliance officer. After that comes back into the code compliance officer, the department heads then hold roundtable meetings on a weekly basis. That information is then disseminated and talked about in a group of the violations that are coming in or that we're dealing with that week. So basically, we'll talk about anywhere from abatement projects, parking issues, weeds, any of those types of issues will come in, and then we'll talk about it as a group. If a violation at that point is decided to be issued, it is sent over to the appropriate department head, whether it's planning or zoning issue, it's a building issue, if it's a police department issue or those types of issues, it goes up to that department head for final approval for that violation to be sent out. Once it's approved, the code compliance officer generates that violation through a system called iWorks. And then that violation is then sent out, and that code compliance officer keeps track of hundreds of violations and up to date on, are we at a where we're at in the process, whether we're sending it over to abatement, are we at final notice? That is the role of the code compliance officers, to keep up to date on that. The code compliance, and when we're dealing with these types of issues, we've gone to a 30, 60, 90-day notice of violation. So basically the first notice is sent out and they're given 30 days. So that is just a warning saying, hey, you are not in compliance with this city code. And that gives them 30 days to get in compliance. If they get in compliance, we'll send code enforcement out to verify it's been taken care of. And then that complaint is then closed out. If it persists, then we do, after the 60-day, we send actually a notice of violation with no fine. It's saying you are now in violation. This is your official notice of violation. Once, then they're given another 30 days to comply. If they don't comply after that 30 days, then another notice with a fine is attached to hopefully mitigate that code issue. If it doesn't get taken care of after that point, it is then sent over to legal for abatement, and then that's pushed over to our attorneys to take care of from that side. So that's kind of how the structure is set up, and that's kind of the difference between, so what is the compliance officer's duties versus code enforcement. Code enforcement over the last 6 months has really morphed and changed. Code enforcement is really your field agents. They're your animal control officers. They're the ones that are going to be doing all the field work, investigation, and your compliance officer is the one tracking all the violations, disseminating the information to the correct department heads so they can make critical decisions with those violations on how to carry violations out, or how they want to handle or manage those types of violations. So this is the way that we have a great team here that came up with this structure and it works really well. Again, so this is kind of the structure we have in place now for code enforcement and code compliance.
So talking about the team, our compliance team right now, our core team members generally are Corey, planning director, Barry, our building official, Scott, and then Scott, our building inspector, and myself, and we meet every Tuesday. Other departments or agencies that might be involved are all listed there. It just depends on what the particular code is, what the violation is. So some examples of particular violations. I understand that you were interested in that. We've been doing, we still continue to do short-term rentals. They're still our priority. If there's something different, please let me know. But so they're still being done on the 30, 60 day, 90 process. We do get quite a few of them a year still. We probably get a couple a month. So people are still letting us know and we take care of those. Another one, since the sign code was revised last year, it's one that code enforcement is really able to help us with. They'll take pictures. If you've noticed the feather signs that were prohibited, all of them but one are done, and that violation went out today. So, you know, we've been able to keep that under control, and it's working with code enforcement and everybody else. So then complaints to other agencies. When you've got residents that are talking to you about particular violations and they're not real sure who to contact, this is just an easy rule of thumb. If it's something on private property, have them contact code compliance. If it's something on public property or the streets, so, you know, camping on the streets, illegal parking, abandoned vehicles, even noise, those types of things, they should contact law enforcement for. And then some of the violations that other agencies take care of, construction without a permit, for example, would be building department, cleanliness, rodents, that type of thing, health department, fire department, we know when to call them, and animal control would be barking animals and that type of thing, vicious dogs. So how to file a complaint? We're going to go through the complaint form really quick. Other methods though would be to contact code compliance at the phone number listed, and it's listed on the website. Email code compliance. It's just the word compliance at moabcity.org. And at some point, business cards will have a QR code on the back of them that will take you straight to the page. But let's just go to the code compliance page. This is on the police department's page. And when you're in the police department, there's code compliance. There's a big icon. You're just going to click on it. I tried to make it really easy. This form goes right into iWorks. If the resident knows the address, for example, I'm going to use the city for an example. We're going to go down the street address is 217, obviously, and Moab City. We're going to, and we're doing this just because I want people to see how quick this is. So the red areas obviously are required. So you can give the address of the property. If there's a specific spot on the property, please go ahead and list that. Have you discussed it with the property owner? we just ask you that because sometimes if it's your neighbor, it's a whole lot easier for you to just bring a plate of cookies over and talk to your neighbor than it is for us to send them a violation. But it's not a requirement. If there were a certain time period of the violation, please let us know. There's a bunch of check boxes there for the major violations, and if it's not listed there, please go ahead and list what you need. I'm just going to sign it. If I want to upload a file, I can do that. Oh, except that I don't have one there. Anyhow, you can upload photos and submit. That's as quick. So it really 2 minutes at the most to get people to go ahead and do the violations. So we'll see if we can get back to the page. Oh, probably not, can I? There we go. Look at that. And so in summary, please just have people call me if they've got a complaint. Sometimes I hear that people have complaints and I just never hear about them. So if you'd go ahead and ask them to just give us a call, we can, as a team, work on it and follow up. And how about any questions?
Thanks. That was very informative. Questions for Mona or Scott?
Yeah,
Councilman?
I got a question. So someone does file a complaint. I say that complaint is 120, 180 days old from the original complaint. If this is my neighbor, how do I find out like if that complaint's being dealt with or where it is in the process when it gets to be after the 90 days?
So generally what we would do is you would know it would be closed because I would send you a notice of compliance. We would send you a notice of.
You would send it
compliance.
to the person who made the
The
complaint?
complaint, yes. We usually will send it to both people. We'll send one, there's two separate letters, one that goes to the person that made the complaint. So they know the case is closed. They know we looked into it, but also they know that if in 3 months they see that violation again, to go ahead and send another form. We do send one also to the person who took care of their own violation. Generally, we don't do much interaction once a violation is open. It doesn't mean that we don't. If you wanted to call and check on it, if it just seemed like nothing was happening on it to you, but oftentimes most of what's happening is things you're not going to see, especially if it's been going on for the 90 days.
Right. And if there is a complaint, does if it's a code violation where it's an obvious code violation that shouldn't be happening, does the person who filed the complaint, are they kept anonymous or are they kept?
Everybody is,
Okay, perfect.
everybody is. We have-
Even after the letter of compliance is in there.
Right. You do have to realize that everything can be grammar. Yeah.
Right. That's what I was,
there's
yeah,
always
it's
that.
grammable.
Right,
to find out who
right.
did it, yeah.
But as far as if your neighbor filed a complaint against you and you called me and said, I know it's my neighbor that did this, I would not give any indication that that was what was going on. We just were really, really protective of people that file complaints.
Is there any reason why we don't offer an anonymous option? Like I get like you wouldn't be able to send confirmation that like it's come into compliance or anything like that, but from what I understand is there's people in the community knowing that it's grammable that are afraid to submit complaints. So I think that's sometimes why complaints don't ever make it to your desk. So I was just wondering why there isn't an option to submit things anonymously.
That was a policy decision actually directed by, I think, me and in coordination with Mona and some others about how this kind of works. We found that if it's anonymous, one, we don't necessarily have all the information we need, so we kind of go on a wild goose chase with no way of like asking follow-up questions. Two, it would be sometimes just retaliatory, just like neighbors kind of or people in the community holding grudges and sort of making frivolous complaints, not backing it up. And you know, if you care enough to make a complaint, you should probably care enough to stand by what you had to say. Like you're going to accuse somebody of something, we did have like an anonymous option for a little bit and it was very dysfunctional. It was misused. for
Yeah. No, and that's definitely a concern that I have. It's just, I'm aware of a couple of situations from the past where there have unfortunately been like either like at the time of leaked like verification as to like who submitted the complaint,
Mhm.
or somebody did grandma it, and like it's a very big like concern for a lot of people. Or some of the complaints that like were brought to my attention were really kind of a big deal for the person to bring up, and once that individual found out who was a neighbor, they started to act with a lot more hostility
Mhm.
towards those individuals. And so I can see both sides to it. It's just, yeah, I don't know what the,
I would say that we probably have a suspicion of who the complainant is too anyway, like there's been some sort of issue in the past. And so even trying to keep it anonymous and sort of not
well, right.
nonsense.
The cookie, taking cookies over has failed. And so, you know, you've
Yeah.
moved on to the next step, you know, and they know who it is. It's like, oh, that guy just brought cookies to my house last week and told me to clean up my junk cars, you know.
Yeah.
However,
Thing about my.
However, you put a thing in like, hey, my neighbor is cooking things they shouldn't be cooking in their house, you know, and you guys go by and can see that. It's like, oh, at that point, it should be anonymous, you know, or you know, because you've been made aware of the issue, you know, and it escalates to that it doesn't matter who made the complaint, you've now been made aware of the issue, and the issue is a greater thing than who made the complaint. Does that make sense? You know, like, hey, you guys should swing by this house, it's on fire.
Yeah.
When you go by the house and it's on fire, you don't care who made the complaint. You're dealing with the house on fire. You
Yeah,
know,
and if someone like calls and says there's this house on fire, we're not, you can be like, what's your name, sir? But if it's like him, you know, my neighbor is doing this and this and this.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, so it's your neighbor, we know the location and everything like that. And I mean, there are times when the claims were just not true, where people kept making claims that weren't true. We did a lot of staff time, kind of in retaliation for whatever kind of grudge there was. And it just, we kind of had to put a stop to it because it was,
Yeah.
it was being.
yeah. And I get like a lot of this is primarily like a capacity issue, but we decided to employ a complaints-based like code compliance approach. And so we've put the residents kind of in that position by the decision that we made. And so, yeah, I don't know if that maybe like for future conversations to see if there's like a way to expand that to have some more proactive enforcement that might take that situation out of that individual's hands.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to think about those situations.
Yeah, I can throw out an example to help Luke. Like, I mean, I definitely know we've dealt with people who have a neighbor where they want to file a complaint, but they actually do business in town with said neighbor, or they might be reliant on said neighbor for some kind of funding. And so that, just to give people an example, probably is one thing. And then I think it's just, you know, just an extra heavy thing to be discussing this week, because of course we have, you know, a family in the US who was, you know, basically shot because they asked their neighbor to turn the noise down so the baby could sleep. So, you know, I mean, there are things that concern people, but I had a few questions for you guys, because over the years we've been told some different things, and I know we've had a lot of turnover, and maybe it just helps to kind of check where we're at with those. Are there instances where people just shouldn't waste their time contacting the city about certain things? Because I know there have been instances where in the end people are told, well, you just have a bad neighbor, and that's unfortunate, but you know, that's the case. So I understand there are probably a lot of moving factors, but are there ones that just stand out that people should be aware of that probably shouldn't be? Yeah.
Well, I think this is
Oh.
our belief. When a
Yeah.
complaint comes in, I think it needs to be vetted,
Mhm.
meaning that we now have the code enforcement guys out there that are driving around all day. If whether that's a validated complaint or not,
Mhm.
that's for our code enforcement guys to go out there and actually drive by and figure that out. Again, they can't go on private property and do those types of things, but if they can see it from, you know, the property lines and stuff like that and take photos, I think it's something that we need to do to vet that actual complaint to make sure it's taken care of. The nice thing about them going out there and having code enforcement take care of that is we can then determine, is it a founded complaint or is it unfounded? And then work with what we have and make those decisions. So when complaints come in, we don't look at it as, no, we're not going to deal with this. It is, no, we're going to go out and do an investigation on it first. And then to figure out, is it a founded complaint or is it unfounded? And then make the determination after we have the appropriate information.
Mhm. Yeah, and maybe it just helps people to know there's certain elements of rudeness and disrespect that aren't illegal and yeah. And that's
Yeah.
probably maybe where some of the frustration
Yeah,
builds.
we can't make your neighbor not a jerk. That's probably true. So-
Yeah. In the past, maybe with some past, police chiefs, we'd gone back and forth a little bit about, whether, the city has a good nuisance ordinance or it's really insufficient and not good. And we should have, a different or new one, same with like, some years ago. I think there was one incident where, a prior chief pointed out, oh yeah, you guys could use a dangerous dog ordinance because that would have helped in this situation. So I'm just curious, code wise or procedure wise, are there things that it would be helpful if we updated them or added them that would help you guys? Yeah.
So with this new Spillman upgrade, I've been going through a lot of city code and stuff
Mhm.
like that. There's a lot of duplication between state code and city ordinances that are in there. It's yes, there are a lot of tools that are not in our city ordinances that would be very helpful for code compliance and code enforcement to do their jobs. But I believe the city's gonna already go down that route with the full, revision of the city code. And I think that would just be incorporated into that revision of your city code when that was to take, whenever that takes place.
Okay, cool. And then someone I'm sure at this table knows, but look, one of the things on people's mind, I think, is, oh, okay, compliance with the dark sky ordinance. How much time do I have for that? Do we have an update on that date or just a reminder for people?
We
Yeah.
do, actually. Kaylin and I are working on that as we speak. And should have something before the council in another month.
I guess it depends what the process will be, if we're gonna workshop it with the council first or
Right.
work with planning and other staff and then planning commission.
Right.
So,
More to come.
Yeah.
But we just met last week, I think it was, 2 weeks ago. So we're moving forward with that. It's just the Timeline is getting short.
I guess another question is, because, one of the hard things people deal with in town is sometimes, yes, the neighbor that seems to be a health or fire or some kind of other safety hazard. And I totally understand that we have the structure for the 30, 60, 90, but sometimes investigations take longer. So is there some added context that we in the public should understand that there are maybe exceptions where the process takes longer or
I think we can speak to that. So
yeah,
we actually have a couple violations out right now that it's probably gone past that 30, 60, 90 because of the circumstances that are involved. But most of those ones are the person that is in violation is working with the planning department or the zoning department or with the police department to mitigate that. And they're time sensitive based on whether it's a permit issue or those types of things. So yes, there are some times where we have to flex out where the people or the individuals are working with the city to get in compliance. And that's where, common sense has to come into play is you can't be absolutely hard set on those, especially when they're working with the city to get in compliance with certain things.
I'm sure there's certain privacy issues, but if you happen to be a neighbor who's dealing, living next door to a situation like that, do you have a right to know that it's being worked on? Or is it usually just kind of, is the answer, this is under investigation or it's
I think
whatever,
that's-
it's
I
in
think-
process or,
I think
Yeah.
it's, it would be my policy. We were not going to disclose any of that information or
Yeah.
volunteer that information.
yeah.
It's the right of the citizen to come in and fill out a records request and get that information if that's what they choose to do. But I don't think it would be good practice for us to just be volunteering that information and putting that out there. So if the citizen wants that information, it's available and there's a process for that. But outside of that, I don't think it would be constructive to have those conversations, outside of that.
Okay, thanks.
Do you ever have people pay the fine but not fix the problem?
It's usually the other way around,
But,
actually.
okay.
They'll
I'm just
fix
kind of,
the problem but not pay the fine.
I just wondering, because, you know,
Yeah.
at our last city council meeting, that they were talking about like loud exhaust and how they said they pulled people over and they're like, I'll just keep paying the fine, but I'm not changing, you know, the exhaust or whatever like that.
So that's a little,
That's.
so that's a little bit different element. So that's actually, we're stepping out of code compliance and code enforcement. We're now stepping over into law enforcement side of
Yeah,
the house. When it comes to muffler violations, those types of thing, health and safety, that's now on the law enforcement realm. You're gonna get that, but there are some things we can do to mitigate that. So if an officer keeps on coming across that individual and is issued citations, they can actually submit them for a Department of Motor Vehicles review. There's forms for that. If they are in continued violations, and they send that over to the Department of Motor Vehicles, they can do what they call an inspection. DPS comes out and will do an inspection or Department of Motor Vehicles on that. If it is not in compliance, they can revoke the registration for that vehicle.
I guess I had one other question from you guys, just in terms of what you've seen in other communities. I'm sure this is something all municipalities struggle with, but it seems like for us as council members, almost every time we deal with something that has to do with policy, well, I would say it seems like at least 90% of the time, there is an element of it when you're debating, you know, whether you should add it or expand it or shrink it that has to do with the enforcement, right? Like it's a great idea, but without enforcement, it's going to be, you know, pointless or a disaster or something. And obviously the problem with that is as you try to make changes, you're always adding to the enforcement expense or budget. And at some point, you just can't keep up with ideally the amount of enforcement you've already committed to that isn't happening. And I didn't know if you guys had seen any models or examples of, you know, anyone ever getting a leash on that. So it doesn't seem so overwhelming because it does at some point make it hard because you have a great, you know, idea from the community and you think, oh, that would be great. So great for our residents, but you're like, crap, it won't be any good without enforcement. And we're not sure that we can, you know, guarantee that or build that in. Yeah.
So I'll be honest with
Yeah.
you, code enforcement is, it doesn't matter how much staff you throw at it, there's always going to be problems. And let me give you an example. We actually had a roundtable about this today in the meeting. Let's talk about weeds, right? So weeds on everyone property. So like right now, we're in prime time where there's weeds everywhere, right? So if you look at every single residence, probably 60% of the residents within the city would probably be in violation. We can probably agree on that, right? So it doesn't matter how much staff you throw out, there's always going to be those violations that are always going to be out there. To me, it's looking out and dealing with the major issues which we have in the city. Whether that is, and you got to look at it as what are our health and safety risks? That is where our resources truly needed to be focused on. And is there a risk to our citizens by not abating those types of things? And that's where the city's resources needs to put their time and effort into those types of things. So say you'll see it come in droves and waves. So you'll get hit with a bunch of this stuff, then it will slow down. When those slow down times, then you can go deal with those minor issues you're having, the weeds, those types of things. But again, it's a roller coaster. No city's ever going to have a handle on code enforcement and code compliance. It crosses so many different avenues from the sewer department, grease traps, planning and zoning. There's so many elements integrated with it and so many state laws, federal laws, and city code that you could give me another 20 code enforcement officers. We probably still wouldn't be able to keep up with everything within the city. So it's dealing with the health and safety issues and the major things within the city that I think is the most important.
Yeah. And just so we communicate well, you know, because we've discussed over the years, like, okay, we have a complaint driven system. And obviously, you know, law enforcement has certain things that are going to kick in and they're not going to wait for someone to complain. Like it's clearly a legal violation and you're going to, you know, ticket someone if you see them doing it. But I guess one of the things that can get confusing for us too is when we have this complaint driven system and we all agree that, you know, safety and health issues should be primary. Is there an advantage just for good communication for us all to agree, like, you know, what items should probably be on those lists and proactively enforce. Like, I mean, I don't think anybody expects anyone right now to go measure a weed or something, but, you know, clearly if you see, on, you know, rats running around or something, I don't know what it's going to be, but, that's probably a proactive one. Or, I mean, I've just never been sure, like, is it ever helpful when you're on your end of it to kind of, have some clear communication from us about what seems like a no-brainer to us that, yeah.
I would look
But-
forward to
Yeah.
having you sit down a conversation of what you guys feel your guys' priorities are and what you would focus as a city. I know we've talked about, it's really a complaint-driven process. I would tend to disagree with that just a little bit because our code enforcement guys are out actually down. We actually hired a gentleman by the name of David Paxton that actually comes with a significant amount of code enforcement experience, and he's been a great element coming onto the team. So for instance, we had a bunch of red curbs that were just recently painted on 100 North,
Mm.
right? So some of that stuff is they're noticing those types of things and they're actually being proactive now and dealing with some of the stuff that is happening within the city. A lot of the sign violations, they're observing them and they're taking photos, and that's now going into compliance. So some of this stuff now is actually being driven by code enforcement
Yeah.
when they're in the field. So again, I would love to get a list from the administration. And if they want to, there's certain priorities of the council that they want to look at. I think the team is more than happy to look at that and make that a priority of code compliance and code enforcement moving forward.
Yeah, no, I think just having this discussion helps with communication, because I mean, just because we have been through a lot of changes over the years and you're new and we don't necessarily know that stuff's happening on the ground, right? So it wasn't meant as a criticism, but we honestly don't know. And we kind of know what we were told, 2 to 4 years ago. And, it's a different, maybe a different approach. So thank you. That's helpful.
No problem.
Well, and that's why we have you guys here today. So any other questions?
Just
Can we-
following up on that, is it possible for you to generate a report, just a high level, like, here's the types of violations we're dealing with quantitatively?
She's got it. Is that what you want? What I did was just ran a real quick report from the last year and a half of the major violations, how many there were. And
Let's hear 'em.
okay, so major violations actually have been grease traps, believe it or not. So grease traps, prohibited signs, so those would include a lot of the feather signs that became prohibited last year. That type of thing, illegal camping on private property. So law enforcement would have an added number to that. Short-term rentals, illegal short-term rentals in residential zones. Signs installed without sign permits. Construction without a permit, maintaining a nuisance. Failure to abate weeds, business licenses, outdoor lighting, dark skies. And then just some, minor ones, right-of-way obstructions. So things that we get public works involved in, a few noise, a few storm water, couple of trees that we thought we were going to have to go trim, but we actually didn't have to. We've got an abatement of dangerous buildings, as you all know. And then just odds and end kind of things. But basically, that's where the bulk is, Karen.
Yep, thank you.
Can I ask you one follow-up question on the abatement of buildings? Like, I know there was money put in the budget for that. And I know, there are probably some people who are maybe in the queue and have existing complaints about that sort of thing. Do we have a process yet in place that will, because I'm only guessing, but I could be wrong, that, yes, you want to focus on the most dangerous threat, but there probably is some equity issue there where, if somebody filed their complaint first, in some ways you could argue, oh, well, they complained a while ago and we should probably try to address that first. So is there anything we should understand about like the order in which they'll be addressed? I'm just wondering, who's going to decide how this money gets used and who's, if there's some people in the queue, who gets dealt with first?
We get direction
Yeah.
from admin on what
Yeah.
to do with abatements.
Yeah.
Those are high profile, really expensive projects, and
Okay.
We go directly to admin and ask them.
Okay,
or
I
get
wasn't sure if there was ever kind of a cheaper fix. Like I've definitely heard of some more expensive examples, but I was like, oh, I wonder if ever kicking in $1,000 really helps with the cleanup, or, 5,000 as opposed to something.
But once it gets to a
Yeah.
base, really, it's now coming out of code compliance and code enforcement hands.
Okay.
So once,
Oh, and I might be using the wrong words too.
Yeah.
I guess I'm thinking about
yeah.
some people
So
who might
once it
benefit.
goes
from-
over to legal,
Yeah,
it's now in the realm of the administrators of the city.
okay,
It's now in their purview, and it's now whatever decisions they make at that time, it's up to them. So on our level, we don't make those decisions. That's all on the administrative level. And again, that then becomes outside of our realm of code enforcement and code compliance.
okay. Yeah, I didn't know, like if someone has a, a hoarding situation and just needs a little help, maybe
Yeah.
moving some stuff offsite, if that's automatically abatement, or sometimes they can benefit from, a little bit of money to help for a little, okay.
Okay, great. Thanks, you guys. Nice job.
Yeah.
Good to learn. This is very informative for me, so I really appreciate it. All right, next we have 3 items on our consent agenda. The first item is the award of a contract for the ball field concessionaire, contract to concessionaires on Center, and a photography concessionaire contract for Katrina Larson Photography. Approval of the minutes from April 25th regular city council meeting, and approval of the bills against the city of Moab in the amount of $711,595. So I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay,
Second,
all right, we have a motion by Jason, seconded by Kalen. Any discussion, Jason?
No.
Kalen?
no.
Anybody else?
I'll just thank Summer for 1 or 2 edits, which I know
Alright.
she made. Thank you, Summer.
All right, we have a motion to approve consent agendas items 6.1, 6.2, and 6.3 made by Jason, seconded by Kalen. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. On to general business. We have a public hearing tonight for resolution 16, 2023, a resolution adopting the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. And Ben is just going to give a brief presentation on this, and then we'll open the public hearing. You guys, I know, have met and talked about the budget, and so this is the budget that's going to be for the public, and then our consideration to approve that budget in soon.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Mayor.
You bet.
So this is the opportunity essentially for the public to weigh in on matters of the budget. Also a similar opportunity for council. There have been a lot of opportunities up to this point, but as we move through the budget cycle, this is essentially where all of the recommendations get collated, and we try and continue to balance the budget with those requests as the council sees fit. And with that said, we'll move through. Like the mayor said, I just have a very brief presentation on some of the high level components of the budget. This may look familiar as it was part of our, in fact, it still says admin budget there at the top. It was part of the admin budget presentation. It is updated with receipts, sales tax receipts through April. So you'll see that again, with the blue line being the budgeted sales tax revenue, and orange being actual revenue, we are still trending above budget through April. And the exciting, this isn't a financial update, but the exciting thing to note here is that year to date, we crossed that threshold into being slightly below budget to slightly over budget. Still very cautionary, as we've heard news about March visitation. So we're anxiously awaiting that update here in a couple weeks. And then we'll have kind of a better idea of where we'll land for the year. Now, all of that said, our budget revenue assumptions were assumed a 3% growth rate for sales tax revenue. There were some revenue considerations that are worth mentioning as an introduction to this public hearing. Again, referring back to that sales tax revenue 3% growth assumption. There are some fees that were amended recently as part of the master fee schedule update that we anticipate will increase revenues slightly in those categories, primarily related to planning and building and zoning, where these all exist within the general fund. It's somewhat difficult to have transparency into those costs to see whether or not those departments are cost neutral in how they interact with the public. So as those fees were increased, we were trying to make that essentially those departments more neutral in their costs. Debt is another revenue consideration. The only debt that the city budgeted for is proposing to budget for as part of the tentative budget process is for the issuance of the Cane Creek Boulevard reconstruction. As a reminder, that's a slightly over $8 million project, of which it's 50% funded by grant, 50% debt. And the final step in that project is just the final funding meeting for that funding source.
CIB,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
And finally, we have some expenditure considerations. What I tried to do here is just kind of draw out some of the key things that the public may be interested in. At the top there are legal fees, and legal fees continue to rise, maybe disproportionately to revenue related to litigation that the city's undertaking. And we still think that you may remember conversations a couple of years ago regarding in-house counsel versus contracted counsel. And I think that's always part of this budget consideration. It's our opinion that we're still getting a good value for that contracted legal service that we are contracting with. Our general liability policy is increasing in maybe not as much as anticipated given the current situations with the city, but we're going to experience an increase in our GL policy. Wages and benefits. Wages are a big portion of the city's expenses. We are budgeting for a 5% cost of living adjustment and 0% merit and no longevity. Our recreation fund, this is one item that stood out during our strategic planning session for me as Annie, essentially she proposed a number of services that may be deficient or could be improved, and it would simply require a budgetary allocation. I think it's important to call out this specifically in that we are budgeting 84% of the prior year expenses. We did have some one-time expenses in the recreation fund last year related to the pool, filter and heater replacements, but it is important to note there that we are actually budgeting for a decrease in the recreation fund expenses this year. We also have capital projects that's important to note. And while I don't want to go line by line into these projects, I think it's important to remember that these are all just roll forwards of major initiatives that are not yet complete from the current year, plus one RAP tax project, which will be exciting as we move forward with that to improve our park programs. Staffing, here we have, as I mentioned earlier, staffing is a huge portion of any city's budget. We had 8 full-time equivalent requests from across various departments, and the admin budget, and here now in the tentative budget, only one of those requests is funded, is proposed to be funded, and that's in the water fund.
And I thought it was 1.5 because of the victim advocate.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You're correct there. 1.5, with the half being a currently part-time budgeted victim advocate position being proposed to that adjusted to a full-time position. Thank you, Carly. And the last item that I wanted to identify here was the housing fund, just because I don't think this had been mentioned in previous budget presentations. Housing fund is operating at a $220,000 deficit. This is not generally funded. It's not funded through sales tax. It's funded through the Wahoo Fund, and where we are now moving forward with the development process, we're hoping that is, that deficit will be short-term in the next year or two. Hopefully we can get that turned around and then use those funds for other purposes that meet the definitions of the Wahoo Fund. So that said, that wraps it up for me.
Thanks, Ben. Any quick questions for Ben before I open up the public hearing?
Will there be an opportunity for discussion after the public hearing or?
Well, we are considering this item, so if you have so we're not voting on this tonight, it's just a
Okay.
public hearing. So if you have questions,
Okay.
we suggest that you bring them up now and then we'll get public comment. And then when it comes up for consideration, we can delve into those.
Oh, okay.
questions Then.
So I sent you an email with a couple questions, and one of them I think Caitlin may speak to. And that's about providing a small amount of funding for the housing task force. Because it's most of those expenses are absorbed by the member entities and staff time, but they are having some real expenditures needs to carry out their work. And I'm not sure like what the mechanism for that interagency budgeting and cooperation is, but it seems like we're thinking of 10 to 15,000 split between the city and the county. And so I'm wondering if there's a possibility to budget for it, and then figure out some of the mechanism and exact expenditures later. And Caitlin, I think, will provide more supporting information when she speaks.
Yeah, thank you. And our perspective on that is that, so this being a new concept, I kind of view this as a community contributions, and that we are currently viewing that as social services, and whether or not that falls under that social service category. And ultimately, this is a question of the council, if this is a priority for the council. So I'm excited to hear from Caitlin and allow her to elaborate on that.
I had one question too, Ben. Given Pete Grouse's visits and mentions of Les Blomberg, who we have had interactions with before, I would be interested if there's a way to come back with us on the cost of bringing Les back, because it's my understanding Pete has been having conversations with the police department, and they would, I think, be interested. So I'd like to know as a council member what that would cost.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's great to bring that up and something we can look into.
That would just be under, what is it, professional and technical services. So we have a line item for basically consultants. I don't know that it would be itemized necessarily. Just come out of that line.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm just wondering if it is something that wasn't in the budget and they weren't counting on as a department, I'd be curious what it would cost to add.
Caitlin.
And then I was down at the lower part of Lions Park recently, and I noticed that I see Annie's here, so maybe she'd want to speak to this. I'm just wondering, like, it appears that the irrigation may not be fixed, and there are still trees that were part of the original planting that are dead and still in the ground, and the turf doesn't look great. At least it's not up to the standard of the other parks. And on the pavilion, some of the exposed wood seems like it's in need for refinishing, and I'd just like to see that park appropriately maintained.
Great.
And I'm wondering if that's funded.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, from a budgetary perspective, we allocate kind of some just general O&M, very light improvements to parks year over year. And so that's generally not something that we would budget specifically for unless it required some significant improvements. So my perspective is that, is it budgeted for? Yes. And it depends on the priority. If that's a priority, like, is that next in line for a priority? And that's something we can work through with Parks and Recreation.
Okay, thanks.
Would the master plan, the park master plan identify, would that?
No, I think there's just maybe, it just needs to be prioritized for maintenance,
Yeah.
not for like a revamp or
Okay,
a renovation.
okay, great.
It seems just the existing infrastructure that needs improvement.
Luke or Jason? Questions? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
And we'll open up the public hearing at 7:04 to comment on the resolution 16/2023 adopting the fiscal year budget 2024. And as is with citizens to be heard, there's a 3-minute time frame. If you could just state your name, that would be great. That would be you, Caitlin, since I know that you're here.
Okay. Hello, my name is Caitlin Myers. I am speaking as the vice chair of the Moab Area Housing Task Force. I sent you all an email earlier today. Apologies and thanks for the grace for us kind of coming in at the gun during your public hearing period. But this came up during our last housing task force meeting. It's actually something that we've talked about for several months now, and are recognizing that The Housing Task Force was created as a body in 2009, originally as the Interlocal Housing Task Force as a result of the 2009 Affordable Housing Plan, which was adopted into the Moab City General Plan. It is a kind of semi-formal body that was created by the city and the county. So I would just like to advocate that because this body was created by resolution, that it is more appropriate. We'd like to advocate for it coming directly from the city budget rather than trying to vie for community contributions or other grant funding. But because we have really ramped up our, housing is a crisis. We all know that. Everyone in this room knows that. And we have ramped up our public advocacy and education events over the last year. We've received $12,000 in grant funding from Grand County's Economic Development Department, and just over the last several years have received piecemeal funding, basically from planning departments. So as the city is entering into this fiscal year budget, we decided to formally request as a mechanism for us to receive sustainable financial support and to have better transparency with how local community-wide housing events are being funded. We are coming forward with an official ask of $7,500 from the city and the county, primarily to fund the ongoing maintenance and operations of moabhousing.com, which has become an incredible resource for social service providers to provide community-wide housing resources for people who live here. We have really ramped up our public education events. I included an invoice to date of 2 housing events that we've hosted through this Moab Housing series that was funded by the county. And we would just like to have an opportunity to create more public community housing resources. So this is our attempt as a body that is not formally through the city or the county, but was created by the city and the county to have a sustainable revenue source. So thank you for your consideration. Laura Harris couldn't be here tonight. She had surgery yesterday. So but we are both here to be a resource and to continue that conversation about what the actual mechanism is, but would like to advocate for that to be considered in the budget. So thank you.
Thanks, Caitlin. Anybody else?
Caitlin is a tough act to follow. You're so good. My name is Abigail Taylor. I'm the executive director at Sea Haven, and I saw that there's a $10,000 line item for shelter. I just want to say, I hope that stays in the budget. I'm assuming that goes for Sea Haven. It historically has. And I want to express appreciation to those that advocated for that to stay. In 2022, we served over 350 people in general between our shelter and outreach programs. In the shelter alone, we served 110. When I first started at Sea Haven, I think we only served 68. So our need is increasing. And my sob story is that the current contract cycle that we are on for our VOCA grants through Utah Office for Victims of Crime, we this current contract cycle received a 20% budget cut from the prior cycle. The one we were about to enter in a few months, it receives another 40% cut. We did receive some money from the state, which I really appreciate, to kind of compensate for that, but every dollar matters. And as we're looking at COLA increases for our staff, that's $80,000 alone right there in salary. So we really appreciate it. And it means so much to our program. So thank you.
Thank you for everything you do too.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else? Public hearing on the budget. Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing at 7:09 PM. And Ben, when will this be on our agenda for consideration? June? Is it the first meeting in June or is it next meeting? Okay, that's what I thought. All right, and we can discuss more at that time. All right, I'm going to move on to our next item on the agenda, consideration of a special event permit for the Grand County 4th of July Parade. Hi, Kelly. Is that what these lovely women are here?
Yes, so Angie from the county is here
Thanks,
as well
Steve.
as a support system. So they're available for questions if you have any. So just kind of to give a brief intro, Grand County this year is hosting a series of events to celebrate Independence Day, so that first weekend of July. And so this permit specifically is for a parade that would be in city limits. So that would be some coordination with city departments such as streets and the police department. And then that route would start with staging out here at the ball fields, and then it would head out to 4th East and down south and finish at the high school. There was a couple items that there were questions on that I just wanted to touch on really quickly. So one of them was the fees for all special event permits and items that are done with those. They're just done based on the fee schedule that's posted online. I do need to make some updates to that city webpage since we just adopted a new fee schedule, but there is a sheet on there that's like the most frequently kind of requested items. So things like encroachment permits, park reservations, and street services. So that will be updated hopefully later this week. And then there was another kind of question about, so we provide a checklist for applicants, and that's mostly just to help the applicant kind of figure out what they do and don't need. And when they first submit the application, it's possible they won't have everything kind of finalized, which is fine. We work with people through that. And everyone kind of fills it out differently. So on this one, I had a question that was in regards to, there's some items that are X'd on here, and they're not checked off, they're X'd because they don't apply to this application. So if there is any confusion there, those ones are not required.
Great. So my understanding is this parade is going to be on 400 East. It's going to start here and then end is it going to end at the high school?
Yes.
Similar to the homecoming.
Mhm.
I know there's been questions of why can't they do it on Main Street? And that's because UDOT won't let us, pretty much.
Yes, they've expressed that it's very difficult to close down that main street. So luckily our streets and our police department have come up with this alternate route that they're able to staff and set up, and then just kind of avoid that main street closure.
And it was really successful for the homecoming parade. It worked really well. Any
Mhm.
questions for Kelly? Jason?
Yeah, did the city help fund the 4th of July events?
I think partially.
We fund the
Fireworks.
fireworks, half of the fireworks, and then we're helping to staff, we're helping the staff like the OSTA celebrations, and we have money available. I've just been looking for like a budget to see what we would want to pay for, if they wanted some city money. We have some budgeted because we were planning to run 4th of July this year.
Okay.
Can't remember.
I was just wondering if we're have money budgeted to help with this, wouldn't it save us money as the city to waive the
Like
permit
a
fee?
special events waiver.
Yeah,
So
Do those.
we should probably just offer a little history there.
we're not doing that.
Yeah, we've done that. I think we did that before I, started at the city, and then as a policy, the council stepped away from it. I don't know that entire history. Looks
You-
like you do.
I mean, I know for those of us who've been on the council longer, when we came on, for several years, there was a waiver when people met certain, could tick off certain boxes, that qualified for a waiver, but at some point, you may remember a little bit more, Kaylin, we moved away from that. Yeah.
We moved to the community contributions because the event waiver basically created a mechanism for groups that were doing special events to receive city funds that groups that don't do special events didn't have access to. And so we wanted to create a more uniform and accessible project to all worthwhile
Okay.
causes.
And
And also a
yeah.
mechanism to sort of track. I mean, like any granting organization, like have a consistent application as opposed to just making ad hoc decisions like.
Right.
And I think we had some past city managers who said, well, it's better to figure out what your true costs are. I mean, just like with everything else, right? Like, we had a year where we waived some impact fees for a housing development only for the mayor at the time to later realize, oh crap, those are real costs. We can't just waive that unless we find that money in the budget. So really it does need to be paid. We had some past administration that said, look, these are real staffing costs if you have to have public works out and you have to have a significant amount of the police department. So we should start trying to enumerate that and figure out what it costs so that if you are doing a grant or something, you know what the value is. So I think it's a fair question to say. I mean, I think it's always good to know what the true cost is. Like, it looks like if we truly had officers at every one of these intersections, it's going to be pretty expensive for the event organizer. So I think it's fair to look at what that costs and see if we have money set aside, if we can.
That would be, yeah.
Yeah.
We would have to come to the council for.
Yeah.
approval. It's not an action item on the agenda now. so we
Yeah.
can vote on it Now,
Yeah,
they can certainly make that application.
I think it would just
but-
be, yeah. I mean, since we stepped out of the waiver world, I don't know if we want to step back in, but if, like you said, there was 4th of July money set aside, then maybe this
And it's
4th of July.
Right, for the county. So whether we give them.
Yeah.
A certain amount of money to offset their cost of OSTA or at parade. maybe.
Right, we're offering them money to offset their costs that are then being paid back to us.
Yeah.
to host their event.
Okay. Way to make this a simple conversation confusing.
Yeah.
Yes, Caitlin.
Well, I was just going to say that, I mean, I anyway would like the city to participate financially with other community organizations in the 4th of July celebration, but I'm not prepared to direct you at this
Yeah,
time
right.
how that happens.
All right. So the item before us is to consider the approval of a special event permit application for Grand County's 4th of July parade. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I can move to approve the special event permit
Thank
for
you.
the 2023 Grand County 4th of July Parade event.
Thank you. Second,
Second,
seconded by everybody else. We'll say Kalen. And any discussion, Ronnie? Kalen?
Nope.
Luke or Jason?
I was just say thank you, Angela, for putting this on. This is like something that comes up every 4th of July for the last 100 years. Thank you for jumping on this and making it happen.
Excited about it and have a great.
Yeah, I'm excited. This
Well,
is
could you
neat.
introduce, well, let's vote on this. And then I'd like to introduce the young ladies in the cowboy hats. You guys, I imagine you're the queens of the parade. All right, we have a motion to approve the special event permit for Grand County's 4th of July parade made by Ronnie, seconded by Kalen. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. And who are you lovely ladies?
So I'm Angie Buck, the director of OSTA. And we have mom Rachel Cresto here, who's also volunteering and helping organize the county fair. We have Rory Cresto, who is the PRCA rodeo queen.
Stand
And
up.
we have the first attendant here. Charlie Carter, sorry. We have Dad here sitting up front, and then we have Miss Nico back here, who's also volunteering, helping put on the county fair.
Great job, you guys.
Yeah.
So why don't the queens stand up so that we can see you? 'Cause you look so beautiful. Very nice. Look. Very good. Thank you, guys. We're looking forward to it. It's going to be a really fun event. Thanks so much.
That-
And we will definitely have flags lining Main Street.
Oh,
So don't
that's-
worry about that. Flags, yes. Starting Memorial Day, lasting until Veterans Day. Okay, we have 2 items on the agenda, planning items. We have Corey here to discuss those with us. The first one is a minor subdivision. This is an administrative consideration. It's proposed resolution 15/2023, a resolution approving the final plat for the Nichols minor subdivision of property located at 612 Nichols Lane, Moab, Utah 84532. And basically, this is 2 lots that are being, one is a flag lot. And they're being, they're requesting to add an additional lot to the 2 lots, including the portion that is the flag lot. I know I just totally.
No,
blew that
that's-
Completely,
No, that
completely, but it's
we
kind of
practiced.
complicated, but it's not that.
correct. The action is a minor subdivision, a single lot into 2.
Where this is abnormal is in the larger subdivision context. There was a component of the access way that was poised as a flag lot and is being treated as such, but is not technically a flag lot, to complicate things further. But through our provisions, the access requirements for lots are limited. So within that strip, you'll see within the packet that hashed area or the highlighted component of that access is being now overlaid as a shared driveway access and utility easement, therefore removing the flag lot component and essentially making a shared driveway access for the newly created lot of the minor subdivision. So again, the action is quite simple, one lot into two, but the peripheral materials for the agreements and maintenance agreements is to basically ensure adequate safety that is actually going to improve the safety situation of that end of Nichols Lane, which is because of the historic subdivision context, not up to current access standards. So this will, yeah, again, just improve the access for both emergency services, but then also for the future property owners.
You explained it much better than I did. Any questions for Corey?
Corey, I just wanted to confirm one thing. I did read through your August 22 letter in which you lined out several ways the configuration at the time didn't satisfy city code, but I'm correct, right, that the record of decision in April of 23, then everything's good to go. All your concerns you had are taken care of.
They will be, yeah. The way we're framing this is prior to any recording so it needs to receive your approval first before we can actually enforce on these components, is prior to the recording of the county, that the improvements are actually done prior to. So we're gonna essentially hold the Mylar platting until maintenance agreements are established and on-site conditions are improved, meaning moving a fence and a hard surfacing component to sufficiently support the fire apparatus.
Okay, yeah, that was my only other question. The motion before us, just if those two conditions still hold. Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions?
My only question, and I guess you've kind of answered it, was it's kind of a weird street going from a 40-foot wide street at the bottom to a 25-foot, to an off-center 25-foot wide street, which, it doesn't seem like there's gonna be any more people living up there than what's there now and stuff. So that it just seemed like it's a narrow street for.
It is,
now.
and that's where I think where we're balancing what are the property owner's rights to pursue lot divisions in a certain way, but also mitigate safety and impact for an actual circulation. So within that area, it's in the R2 zone. So the planned, and it's, not within the proposal tonight, but is anticipating converting the existing property into a duplex and then the new property into a duplex for intended to be local housing, given that the property owner is actually living in that third unassociated lot. So he's not gonna, I think, assumingly put anything next to his own house that he wouldn't want to be a neighbor of. But as far as access goes, it's not going to significantly increase like a multi-household project.
Motion?
I move to approve Moab City Resolution 15-2023, a resolution approving the final plat for the Nichols Minor subdivision of property located at 612 and 616 Nichols Lane, Moab, Utah, with the following conditions. All comments shall be addressed to the satisfaction of the Moab City Engineer and Planning Department prior to final recording, including proposed access and utility easement areas shall be cleared of obstructions or fences and hard surface to meet the city engineer's specified requirements. And completion of driveway agreement between 616 Nichols, parcel number 01-0MNI-0025, and the newly created parcel, including conditions and maintenance statements.
Thank you, Caitlin. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion made by Caitlin, seconded by Ronnie. Any further discussion? Caitlin?
No.
Ronnie?
No.
Anybody else? Jason, Luke? All right, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 4-0. All right. The next item is consideration of the proposed resolution 17-2023, a resolution approving the preserved subdivision tract amendment petition for property located at 850 West Bird Avenue, Moab, Utah 84532. Now, I'll probably screw this one up too, but if you guys all recall, last summer, we had to have an emergency meeting because there was an easement issue. And And so we gave the birds some time to correct the issue, and this is correcting the issue. So why don't you just explain a little bit more detail, because it is kind of confusing.
Sure. And this one I might actually share a screen as well, just briefly.
The map is so fun.
Yes. So this is the vicinity map that was in the package, just to give context to where we're looking at, because it is such a thin piece of property in the legal terms of a tract of land, as opposed to what would be a lot or parcel. Specifically identified in this survey plat. We'll even zoom in here to identify really what's going on. Thank you for your patience there. So difficult to identify, but essentially there was this long, thin layer of tract intended as a preservation strip during the original subdivision to protect from adjacent properties accessing main infrastructure, utility infrastructure that was put forth. So what we would normally see now is more of a pioneering agreement or some other non-land use related mechanism to incur for adjacent properties to access and pay into the city infrastructure. So what was being done here is a simple act of actually just piecing out, at least for, you can see the adjacent property here for Charlie Ramser. I'm not sure if our applicants actually.
No.
Okay. But allowing there to actually now be a legal description for him to now purchase, and then later through another action, incorporate into his lower lot to access both utilities and the right of way. So a simple act, but yeah, when we had given the extension on that agreement, this was the nature of what they would be doing, is seeking the adjacent owners to actually remove these tracks and have them become parts of the lots of adjacent neighborhoods.
Questions? Motion?
Motion to approve resolution 17-2023, approving the preserved subdivision tract amendment for property located at 850 West Bird Avenue. No.
Motion by Kalen, seconded by Luke. Discussion, Kalen?
Nope.
Luke? Ronnie, Jason? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 4-0. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you so much.
And last on our general business is the consideration of resolution 13-2023, a resolution adopting an interlocal agreement for the provision of election services by and between the city of Moab and Grant County. And we have Summer who's going to present this if anybody has any questions. I mean, it's pretty simple. Do you have any questions for Summer? And I'll ask for a motion.
I think I'll just say to Summer, I think when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, did the price of elections go up? But I think I was talking to Ben and Carly, and it does seem like the county had, I mean, just in case this is useful for anyone in the public or Doug, that they did kind of look and they were like, okay, yeah, we probably weren't charging enough. Is that isn't an accurate description?
That's the information that they.
Okay, yeah, okay, cool, thanks.
All right. We have a motion.
I move to adopt resolution 13-2023, approving an interlocal agreement between the city of Moab and Grant County for election services.
Motion by Kalen,
Second.
second by Luke. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Well, Kalen, you were on a roll this evening. Thank you.
Yes, so.
All right, very good. That's the end of our general business. We'll move on to city manager updates.
Good evening, everyone. We're coming to the time of year where I have a lot of exciting city events to announce. First, the next Moab Art Walk is May 13th from 5 to 8 p.m. It starts at the Mark. And there's always excellent programming put on by our arts director there. The first arts and ag market of the season is May 19th. It starts at 5 p.m. at Swanee Park. It goes till dusk. It's my favorite event. I know this is all about what my favorite things are, but I'm just letting you know. And a couple exciting events coming up as we kick off our water resource management plan public engagement. First, the second focus group workshop will be held May 22nd at 6 p.m. via Zoom. Details for the Zoom and a QR code to access it can be found on the city's website for the project at moabcity.org. And then we'll have an in-person public open house on May 24th from 5 to 7 at the Grand Center. In between that, we will have on May 23rd a city council meeting where we'll be discussing some water stuff in closed session as well. So big water week coming up. And finally, I have an announcement about a grant we received to renovate the Old City Park pond. So it's a $15,000 grant from, I think it's from Outdoor Rec. Is that the like Division of Outdoor Rec grants? And we are matching that, and we will be able to make those the stream bank safer and remove the chain link fence and make some improvements around the pond. So it's been a big priority for a long time. I'm glad we're getting around to it. Those are my announcements.
Thanks, Carly. We'll move on to mayor and council reports, and we'll start with Ronnie.
Okay, I attended the April 26th library presentation by USGS hydrologist Chris Wojciechowski on how their stream gauges work and how you can get data. And the library pointed out they would be putting the whole presentation on their YouTube site, and I checked and it is up. It's about an hour presentation, so definitely recommend that one. On April 27th, I attended the open house for the Cane Creek redevelopment, and appreciated talking to the consultants, and nice job laying out the maps across several tables with the curve. We had a GWISA meeting last Thursday, in which we had, for those of you who've been attending the MOP meetings, and we've so far had one presentation by Cash Stallings, Mark Stolzen's colleague, about the legislative bills that have come out in the last session of interest to our watershed. And so Cash did a smaller presentation at the request of Trisha Dean for GWISA, which was good, and the repetition helps, I find. And then Dale Weiss at GWISA on the board has been looking into those grants I mentioned before that came up at the last MOP meeting, having to do with from BUREC, having to do with drought resiliency. So those will be running out in the summer, and then probably with the deadline in October. So GWIS is definitely interested in hearing if there's anything the city might want to partner on. They're still reading up on them and trying to figure out what might qualify. There was some discussion about, let's see, they've had some staff vacancies at GWISA that they have been fortunate to fill. So they seem in good shape there. I did go listen in yesterday. It was the mayor and Noel Ginou of, Noel, I'm probably mispronouncing that, but of the county were presenting to the Grand County Planning Commission on the Site Futures Committee Community Vision. So that was good, and really interesting questions from the Planning Commission. And other than that, I was just going to put in a plug because I know a lot of you are river people. And when I was at the library, they were discussing gauges. They made a plug for their next event, which I know some of you will be excited about, which is on Thursday, May 11th at 7 at Star Hall. They're going to be continuing their River History series with Roy Webb, where he's showing archival river films. And so anyway, some featuring Norm Nevels and Dee Holiday, Al Morton on the San Juan, and Cataract and Glen Canyons. And it is free. That was it.
Thanks, Ronnie. My understanding is that one of your board members on the GWISA board passed away. And do you
Yes.
have any idea on how they're going to find his replacement or how that process works?
No, we did have a card that we signed for the family, but I think it had just happened and was rather emotional for people, so it hasn't been discussed yet.
Yeah, keep us posted. If there's people, if there's somebody that we'd like to get on that board, we might want to advocate for that. All right, Luke.
I don't have much to report, just got back a week ago. And participated in the trail mix meeting today. There's been some positive feedback regarding like maintenance Mondays, and people are seeing if it could happen more than just once a month, potentially on a different time and day, so that other people can participate. And then the facelift event occurred, which I guess went off like really, really well. They had 60 to 70 volunteers throughout it and did a lot of work kind of around the county. And yeah, the only other thing that was brought up that was kind of like of concern is I guess companies are beginning to search for lithium in the area and are using old oil wells to kind of check down. And I guess our lithium is located around 9,000 feet, which is basically like within the brine layer. So I think some sort of legal action got taken to do an environmental analysis to see how that might potentially affect it. But from what we were informed is if they do find sufficient lithium, then they might try to like move forward in terms of extraction. So it's something on our radar.
Yep, great. Thanks, Luke. Jason.
I don't have much. The only thing I attended was the King Creek open house, which I thought was really good.
Great. Kaylin?
I attended a Community Renewable Energy Agency board meeting, and the agency has hired a communications consultant to help with sort of public communications naturally around the whole process and helping the public understand what we're up to and benefits of the program and how you can participate or opt out. And the Rocky Mountain Power released their next iteration of their integrated resource plan. And that has more renewable generation and storage. And they're planning to close the remaining, the two big coal plants that we've
yeah.
been worried about regional haze from.
Huntington and Hunter. Yeah, that Rocky Mountain they're gonna do nuclear. I think they're planning on nuclear up there.
I mean, they mentioned that, but it seems like that's all somewhat speculative. And it's a long-term plan. So whether or not it comes to pass, but that seems like good news. Their they're projecting that their fuel mix will move more towards renewables, but that's not projected to influence how much of the community renewable energy assets, the size of the program, because it's just how it's calculated.
Right.
I attended a Moab Area Housing Task Force meeting at which we discussed the need for funding. There's going to be the next in the Moab Housing Series, which is part of what the funding is for, is called ADU 101. So it's basically to help people understand like what is an ADU and how do you build one. And city staff as well as county and lenders and contractors will be there to just help people get an overview of what's involved. And let's see, just some reports from the member agency. Sea Haven is working on an expansion and they're making progress on Lake At. The county is processing more alternative dwelling unit applications and their HDHO discussions are proceeding. CNHA purchased housing for parks workers will be the first priority for it, but then they'll have a cascade of eligibility. The land trust approved a contract to build 24 rental cottage units, and that'll be up to 120% of AMI. And PASU closed and broke ground on 7 more self-help units. And they didn't know what was my other meeting. Sorry. I wasn't as organized as I tried to be. I saw a good bumper sticker today.
Just one.
It said, use the quads God gave you.
Use the what?
The quads God gave you.
I know where you saw it.
Oh, funny.
hold on. I think I had one more, but I just can't.
Here, why don't I go and then if
Yeah,
you
you
find it,
go.
okay? So we had a meeting with staff with the Association of Government to talk about transit services last Friday, specifically around funding options, more information. We need to get more information about the fifth and fifth opportunities for funding. As Ronnie mentioned, we presented at the Planning and Zoning Commission Grant County yesterday on the future site of the Umter site, and the commission did endorse that plan and recommended it to the Grant County Commission. You guys will be seeing that potentially at our next meeting or a meeting in June, a resolution supporting that future site. And I also stuck around for the rest of their meeting, which was really interesting. They had some debriefs on the HDO AEH part of their ordinance. They're struggling a lot with the lendability issue. And so I suggested that they get in touch with Corey, because we had this discussion when we did our AEH. I think it's a little bit more complicated with the overlay than ours was, but anyway, I suggested that they reach out to the planning staff here and see if we could help. And then they also did a debrief on the future land use plan. And I did bring up, as you suggested, are they considering water in that future plan with increased densities? And they said they were, and they're going to lower other densities and in order to allow for that increase. So I think the total build out apparently is staying the same, but they definitely will be considering that and having conversations with us as we move forward with the resource utility management plan. Met with Senator Hinkins. He was in town on the 28th of April. That was a very productive meeting. We focused primarily on fractional ownership. We did talk about AEH. We still have a concern that that could come up at the legislature. And he seemed to be supportive of what we're doing. We also talked about renewing the film incentives for filming here. That funding is going to expire, I believe, at the end of this year. And so that may, if that happens, we may lose film opportunities here in our area. So I think we really want to pitch that. His concern was that the money should, the intent was for the money to come to rural areas like ours in San Juan County, not Park City and St. George. He said that's not what the intent. So I think that is what the debate's going to be about when it comes forward. So we'll be paying attention to that. Also, we have a meeting coming up with Senator McKell and Senator Collmore, who is the Majority Assistant Whip. He's with Salt Lake County. They'll be in town on the 19th with our lobbyist, Casey Hill, and we will have some site visits and a lunch with him, meet with him in my office. Jason is going to join me for those meetings, I hope. That's the plan. And so I'm going to be developing an agenda. I'll share that all with you. Some of you all would like to be part, Jason can move out, somebody else can come in. However, we want to coordinate that so that we have 2 council members. So that's all I have. Did you remember?
Yes, travel council.
Okay.
So we heard from, let's see, the member from the airport board reported, and you all may know this, but the Contour Airlines got the Essential Air Service contract, and they are based out of Phoenix. So they're starting with flights in and out of there. And they said they would try hard to get service to Salt Lake and or Denver, but it's a matter of having gate space, which is apparently competitive. And there's major airlines that use those as hubs. So we'll see. But TSA and checking through as with the current provider will continue.
But in Phoenix.
But through Phoenix.
Yeah. So Jason, do you have any more updates on that? Because I know you mentioned that they were that United or SkyWest was gonna perhaps try again.
Well, I thought I had heard that they'd asked to extend the contract, but it sounds like that didn't happen. Extend the time to put in a contract, and then SkyWest just didn't do it. I'd heard that SkyWest pulled out of like 42 markets this year,
Wow.
or something like that. So yeah, I think it's Contour. And I think that isn't Contour not starting until like October or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our service, I think I heard, ends June 30th.
It ends in June 30th and SkyWest is supposed to keep going until a new provider takes over. But I don't know if they know what the scope of that service is gonna be, if it's the same or not.
Yeah, I don't know. A significant topic of discussion was because of the legislative action which eliminated economic diversification as an allowable use of TRT. They have potentially up to $500,000 to transfer that they were going to spend on economic diversification, which they're now going to spend on marketing. So just trying to figure out what to do with that. There's a summer ad campaign, which will be highlighting weather activities as well as stargazing. So really nice graphics, creative as it's called. And then there is also the Active Transportation Department is working on additional resources to help with training our sort of frontline people on with tourism to help get them educated to easily give sustainable recreation messaging to the people that they're interacting with, whether they are service restaurants or hotel front desk people, as well as obviously guides and have more training. So
Great.
Can I ask Kaylin and Jason a question about the airport? Just
Yeah.
if you guys happen to know.
Jason. he's like,
Okay, yeah. So, so Contour is going to be flying out of Phoenix. I think that's the hub for American. Do we know if
Yes.
there might be any partnering going
This
on?
Contour is American.
Contour is, I don't know, yeah.
Yeah, they are. I think.
Okay. And the other question I had from a resident was, they had a ticket for this summer, but now they're like, oh, I don't know, is my flight still gonna go? And I know, there's some history there with the essential air service, there often seems to be drama, right? So, so we probably don't know, right, if tickets will be honored or not. But-
Right, I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the big question
Yeah.
is that, I think part of the contract that, that SkyWest, or United,
Yeah.
Delta have is that they have to continue on until the new AAS takes effect. But do they have to, provide the same level of service
Mhm.
that they're providing now under the contract? Or will it drop to one flight a week? I think that's kind of the big question.
Okay, so might be just
Yeah, I don't
a wary
know.
warning for people to, okay.
One of the things that I think we need to really be paying attention to is the essential air service. That is always on the cutting block at the federal level. And in the past, when I've gone back to Washington DC, we've gone and specifically met with them to just, let them know how important that service is for our small communities and other rural communities. So we need to be paying attention to that because, with the debt ceiling and all this stuff going back in Washington, they're always looking for cuts and that's one of the first places they look. So that would not be good for us. They
No,
eliminated that.
Right, and I think that, for our community like ourselves and it's really kind of frustrating for the locals, for the businesses that kind of deal with this, is that it's a 3-year contract, and it's unnerving to every 3 years have this come up,
Yeah.
and you don't know where you stand as a business, or even as a local of what you can expect and where to go. And I would really like for us in the county to get together and try to push the transportation department to make it a 7-year contract or a 10-year contract, or make it longer so that people can depend on it,
I think the problem with that, Jason, is that the funding for the service itself.
Yeah,
And so if they don't get funded, then they can't honor those contracts and there's probably some
that's
liability.
true.
But I do think it couldn't hurt for us to go back, when we go to Washington next year and meet with them and talk about the importance of that service. Okay, that's it. We do not have a closed session. This was an error. But we will, in our next meeting, we will have a closed session on pending litigation and primarily we'll be focusing on water rights with Nathan. So with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Galen, you imagine?
I move to adjourn.
All right, and do you all second?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.